That pasty-looking white dude there isn't some Mad Max war boy wannabe. That is Gorr the God-Butcher. Now, here's the thing about this guy. That name, the God-Butcher, isn't just something that he coined himself to make other people think he's all badass. He actually lives up to it. And in this video, in order to make sure that you fully grasp how big of a menace this guy is sure to be in Thor Love and Thunder, I'm gonna go over a handful of gods that he butchered. And know that that name is not an exaggeration. Some of these are gonna get a little gruesome, so you've been warned. With all that being said, let's go ahead and dive right into it. I should probably start this video off by explaining a little bit of Gorr's backstory, so that you can understand why he's decided to kill all gods. Cause normally that's not something that someone just decides to do. I've heard of waking up and choosing violence, but never choosing violence against divine beings. That is a very specific type of bad mood. Gorr was a pretty pathetic being at one point, living a life where he could barely feed himself, let alone his family. Having been taught all of his life to trust in the gods, he figured that his faith would help him in his most dire moments. However, once his pregnant mate died, followed shortly by his own son, he understandably began to question the very existence of these holy beings who were supposed to help him. This, of course, caused him to be labeled a heretic and exiled from his rather religious community. Wandering the wastes, he stumbled upon two gods locked in combat, who had literally fallen out of the sky. The gold-clad one begged Gorr for help, which naturally enraged him. So he reached for the closest weapon he could find, a black gooey blade of some kind, and struck the god down. The other god that gold-clad god was fighting was none other than Null, the dark elder god and creator of the symbiotes, and the weapon that Gorr picked up was All Black the Necro Sword, the first symbiote. Gorr then took All Black and the new powers that it afforded him and headed out into the cosmos, swearing to end the lives of any and all gods for forsaking him in his hour of need. That is one metal as hell backstory and a heck of a first god kill. Something that you'll notice with a lot of the gods that Gorr has taken out in the comics is that quite a few of them are never actually named. We just kinda see the aftermath of their run-in with Gorr, such as the case with the first god corpse that Thor comes upon while out with a Viking warband. This guy was one of the Manidoog, a race of extra-dimensional beings who revered nature and the natural order of things on Earth, who wound up serving as members of the Native American Pantheon of gods. Of course, though, we're just assuming that this is what that guy is, as Thor didn't actually identify him, and he's never really brought up again later on in the comics. But, I mean, come on, we can assume based off of some of the physical features. That, and the Marvel database identifies him as a Manidoog, so I'm gonna go with that. This was actually Thor's first hint that something might be awry, so it's an important kill for Gorr regardless, as it set off what would be known as the God Bomb storyline proper. Of course, Gorr then went and took out a bunch more gods shortly thereafter. In the God Bomb story arc, the next gods that we saw evidence of Gorr doing his whole God Butcher thing on were the Sky Lords of Indigarr. Indigarr was a small, primitive planet out in the cosmos that the Sky Lords watched over. In exchange for worship, they brought rain down upon the people, allowing them to survive in this otherwise harsh world. However, one day the rains just stopped, and no matter how much the people prayed, it never came again. Then, one young girl heard of Thor from passing starships, and so she tried praying to him instead. He heard her prayer, and wound up bringing rain to Indigarr himself. After he did so, he went to check in on the Sky Lords, and found them all dead, with several of their decaying corpses hung up on meat hooks, while the others littered the ground around them. This story at least has a happy ending though, as after Gorr was defeated, Thor returned with a handful of homeless gods from other worlds to take their place as the new Sky Lords. So in the end, things worked out pretty well for Indigarr, all things considered. At one point in the past, Thor and a band of Viking warriors were preparing to engage in combat with some Slavic soldiers along the banks of the Neva River. These soldiers boasted heavily of the might of their two gods, Perun and Chernobog. However, when they looked skyward, only a white-winged horse covered in blood descended from the clouds. Mounting the beast, which had previously belonged to Perun the Storm Lord, Thor rode upwards to investigate, Breaching the clouds, he spotted the decapitated body of Chernobog the Black, still sitting atop his dark steed. And that is when Gorr first attacked Thor in the comics. Even though these two gods don't really do anything in the comics, they kinda are just there to die, their deaths provide the perfect bit of tension before Gorr's big climactic entry. So, you know, that's pretty cool at least. As the story unfolded from there, we got to see somewhat of a montage as Thor discovered more and more gods who had been butchered by Gorr. The gods of the cosmic seasons, Oaken King and Sequoia Queen, were found pinned to a great tree within the Garden Eternal. The war fairies of Windegorge, keepers of a place where it is said that the skies rained milk and trees oozed honey, were found face down in the muck, surrounded by flies and the putrid sense of death. Then there was Falligar the Behemoth, a god that Thor knew in passing. And I actually mean that, in passing. They commonly passed each other while traveling throughout the cosmos. So basically, Falligar was to Thor what that one guy that you see at your apartment complex that you aren't really sure where he lives, you just see him every day after you get home from work, is to you. Although I'd be willing to bet that Falligar here is a bit bigger than that neighbor, at least if I had to venture a guess. We actually saw him in the teaser trailer for Thor Love and Thunder, so presumably he'll play a part in the movie, helping Thor realize that Gorr is no joke, just as he did on the page. Hinkon, the Siberian god of the hunt, was a bit of an oddity. See, normally when Gorr comes face to face with a god, he finishes the job, killing them dead. But with Hinkon here, he actually left him alive, after removing a few of his limbs, of course. He did this so that Hinkon could guide Thor to the cave in which he was hiding out, which he did a pretty good job of, simply telling Thor to follow the screams, which is horrifying but totally on brand for a guy named the God-Butcher. Afterwards, by the way, he asked Thor to put him out of his misery, which of course he did.
Because that's what heroes do.
Even amongst myths and legends, including Hinkon is a bit of a deep cut, because there just really isn't a ton of information out there about his real-world appearances. I mean, look at his Wikipedia page. That's it, just one sentence. So that just goes to show that Gorr is down to kill gods, big or small. You know what's worse than a god butcher? One who can travel through time. And yet, that's exactly what Gorr became once he slew all the time gods, who, I should point out, are legally distinct from the Time Lords. So BBC, keep your lawyers at bay. Although now that I think about it, they do actually kind of look like Time Lords, so maybe there is something there? I don't know, I'm not a lawyer. These beings were a pacifistic race of gods who used their blood, along with a special device, to travel throughout time. Gorr found them and slaughtered each and every single one of them, then used their collected blood to travel to another timeline so that he could build a device called the God Bomb. You can probably guess what it does just from the name. It's meant to kill all gods across all of space and time, all at once. Yeah, it's really not something that you want your bad guy to have. Of course, Gorr got the idea to build this device from someone. I mean, yeah, he's really good at butchering gods, but he's not really a rocket scientist. And that is where Shadrach, the god of bombs, comes in. Because apparently there is a god of explosive ordnance. Of course we need that. That sounds totally natural and not at all alarming. At some point, Gorr hunted down and killed the entire Oghogho Pantheon, save for Shadrach, who he kept alive and tortured by cutting out his eyelids so that he would have to watch Gorr take out all of his friends and family. That might honestly be the most horrible thing that I've heard so far. He did this also that Shadrach would tell him how to build this ultimate weapon, which I really cannot blame Shadrach for caving on. That sounds like a really horrible situation to be in, all things considered. To build this bomb, Gorr required the heart of an elder god. Considering he had a time machine, that proved to be pretty easy for him. What made the whole thing even easier, though, is the fact that he traveled back to the very beginning of time and attacked an elder god while it was still technically a baby. It was a really, really big and honestly super disturbing looking baby, but you know, still a blubbering infant. And Gorr brutally cut the heart out of this thing and then used that to build the bomb. This thing is probably about the easiest god that Gorr has ever taken down. It's probably about as easy as taking candy from a baby. Or I guess taking a heart from a baby. And that is probably the most horrible sentence that I've ever said on YouTube. I kind of feel like I need a drink after saying that, just to sort of wash the taste of it out of my mouth. Ugh. Everyone knows Volstagg. You know, the big guy, one of the Warriors 3, the one who very clearly eats everything in sight whenever he gets a chance. Did you know that Gorr killed him? At least a version of him. This Volstagg, hailing from Earth 14412, was initially captured by Gorr, then tortured because he dared to steal a loaf of bread from a tyrannical Gorr, who then left him to die, crucified upon a wooden stake out in the hot sun, surrounded by the corpses of other past gods. It was a pretty grueling experience to be sure, and one that perfectly illustrates that not only is Gorr a being of pure malice, but one of pure evil as well. I kind of doubt that the version of Gorr that we'll get in the MCU will be quite this dark. But if the one that we see on the big screen is even half as evil as him, audiences will be in for quite the villainous showing. Hey there everybody, I'm John Algetz. I made this video and I want to know what you think. Are you excited to see Gorr the God-Butcher make his big debut in the MCU? Be sure to let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, or go ahead and shoot me a response over on Twitter. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe to CBR for more great videos just like this in the future.